Hi, and welcome to another video from the CTAD Clinic. My name's Dr. Mike Lloyd and I'm the Clinic Director. In the video today I'm going to be looking at kind of a personal opinion really about a sort of an aspect of working with conditions such as Other Specified Dissociative Disorder, Dissociative Identity Disorder and Partial Dissociative Identity Disorder. And this is about the way that the narrative is constructed on how to label or use terminology to define parts within those internal systems with those conditions. Now, all of those conditions are really understood in terms of these internal systems of different parts or others or alters, whatever we want to call them, that are sort of behaving in different ways related to the childhood trauma that brought about those conditions in the first place. And often that's absolutely fine, and there's, that's the way we go about things, and that's all really good. But there's one aspect of it which I've always found a little bit uncomfortable, and something that crops up time and time again in the clinical work that I do with people with these conditions, and that's about sort of using the terminology that's quite negative or kind of emotionally charged with negative ways towards certain parts. And the key of these is looking at things like perpetrator parts or abuser parts or perpetrator introject or even perpetrator imitative parts. And what this does really is it sort of defines the nature of those parts in the way that they've aligned or have needed to align through the traumatic processes within the development of the brain to the people that were hurting the child in the first place. And while this is a useful concept to take place because it helps us understand exactly what's going on with those parts, that as is in the nature of trauma, they've needed to sort of like build some sort of link or alignment with the behaviour of that perpetrator in order to sort of have some protective or defensive aspect to the system. But I think what actually happens later on, and again, this is through conversations that I've had with many patients that have had this happen within inside their systems, is that they tend to sort of like view those parts as being the perpetrators or being the abusers, and the terminology and the way that they're named often really encapsulates that. And the end product of that, or if you like the sort of the byproduct of that, is that they often marginalize those parts. These are seen as fearful, hateful, unlikable, unliked parts. They're pushed away, they're marginalized, and it sort of further keeps the compartmentalization away. So they become, in a way, those sort of like avoided parts. And the narrative towards them is, I hate them, I don't like them, I wish they weren't here, they're ruining my life, I just want to get rid of them. If I could get rid of them, everything will be okay. And then the message that I believe that gets created through the system to all the other parts is, stay away from them, they're horrible, they're awful, they're nasty, they're like the people who hurt us, let's have nothing to do with them. Which is completely the opposite as to what we're trying to achieve therapeutically. Now, lots of different therapeutic systems, formulations, theories, and practitioners kind of have all these different sort of approaches to working with these parts. So again, this is purely sort of my individual experience really in working with people to try and help understand exactly what's going on. And I think that sort of like grouping of parts or the labeling of parts as being good or bad, helpful, unhelpful, nice, horrible, whatever it might be, I think it pretty much sort of maintains that sort of dissociative system that was built up in the first place about compartmentalizing experience in different places. And it leads people to want to spend more time within one group and less time with another, and I think that's kind of not all that therapeutic in terms of the process that we're trying to achieve. So while it makes sense that the parts are doing those behaviours, and those can be really quite unpleasant, attacking, hostile behaviours both within the internal systems to other parts, especially child parts, or even in the outside world to the person or to people that they know, ultimately what it does is it just maintains this system of good versus bad, and I'm not sure that that's a really helpful thing. Now, it might be useful in certain parts of therapy that this is how it gets done, but I think as a whole, it's really useful to take that step back and really recalibrate and understand exactly what it is that we're doing. And I think what's a helpful thing is to try and work it out on the behaviour rather than the nature of the part or the sort of the label or the term of the part. So instead of having sort of perpetrator parts or abuser parts or whatever it might be, we have parts that are identifying or using certain behaviours from the past in order to achieve something in the present. So that it's always about the behaviour or the action systems that are being run through within these parts. So when we look at all of the parts within systems, the helpful construct is work out what's the behaviour, why is that behaviour happening, when is it happening, under what circumstances, and then if need be, how to reorganize that behavior. So we're trying to turn dysfunctional behaviors into functional behaviors, maladaptive behaviors into adaptive behaviors. That's really one of the key goals of therapy for these conditions. So where we have either within OSDD, which is all kind of internal narratives, or in DID, where there could be switching and it could be sort of an external approach to behaviors, it's always about trying to understand what that behavior is, being curious, being insightful, and then formulating and building a deep understanding about what that behavior is actually trying to achieve. So an attacking, abusive type behavior has a purpose. It's not that that part is an abuser, it's that they're using abusive behavior in order to try and achieve some sort of purpose. And the goal of the therapeutic relationship within the setting is to try and understand the nature of that purpose, reorganize it, and try and rebuild a new purpose for that part. But if we label parts as being bad, evil, terrible, horrible, hateful parts, we're less likely to be curious, we're more likely to just reject and push away, and I think that's where the problem sits. So as I've said, there can be times when it's useful to be able to sort of adopt this approach to look at behaviour, to say that is unacceptable behaviour, that shouldn't be happening. But again, it's about managing that behaviour and really trying to build that understanding what the behaviour is. And if we remove ourselves from labelling, which compartmentalises into good versus bad, us against them, and we just look at it as a broad spectrum of behaviours, some of which are helpful, some of which don't seem helpful, some of which might have been useful at one point in time, but now are much less useful, behaviours that we'd like to change, behaviours we'd like to understand. It allows us really to take that step back from that emotional view of what the parts are into what the parts are doing, and that gives us a bit more objectivity and curiosity, which I think really just helps the therapeutic process along. So as I've said, this is a personal opinion based on the experience, and it's a way that when people start talking about the nature of their parts, I say, let's take a step back from that. Let's, instead of thinking about this, let's find other ways of being able to refer to them, other ways of being able to describe them, other ways of being able to sort of like really understand and conceptualize that behavior, that purpose. And then we really get into the nitty-gritty about what is it for, when does it happen, what's it achieving, what's the effect that it has, what's the effect or the impact that you like it to have, what is it about this that we'd like to change. We're not taking away that part, we're not labeling that part as being good or bad, we're simply understanding behaviours and sort of building that narrative around that within the system. So I hope this has been a helpful video. It's a really popular set of terms, this sort of perpetrator parts. I see it all over the place now. It's kind of part of the terminology within dissociation. And as I said at the start, it's never something that I've been particularly comfortable with. And therapeutically, I always try and take that step back and go, let's reorganize ourselves on that. I'm not a big fan of just labeling parts into these groups. I'd much rather keep a sort of a broad spectrum approach to them and really try and understand in the unique qualities and behaviours that each part can present, and see all in a much more neutral, open, and I think welcoming way. So yeah, I'd be really interested in hearing what the comments are. As always, at the end of the video, please put your thoughts down. It's really great to hear those, and there's so much information that gets built into that comment section. I think it's absolutely wonderful. And I often sort of point people towards the comment section and say, please do have a read of that, because that can give you a really wonderful insight into the nature of OSDD and DID and conditions that we're talking about within this channel. So thanks ever so much for all the effort that gets put into those comments. As always, please do the liking and subscribing to watch and share the videos. That's really helpful, and it's really appreciated within all of us here at the clinic. And between now and the next video, please do take great care.